Good evening. Hey. How are y'all doing tonight? Welcome to Theology of Justice. And before we get started, will you join me and just take a deep breath? We're gathered here tonight for what I think is a sacred discussion. Tonight, we're going to talk about what it means to have a theology of justice. Now, theology is the study of God and belief. So a theology of justice is the study of believing in a God of justice. Our theology gives us our moral code and our moral motivation, our reason for acting in our communities. So our goal tonight is to explore how our rooting in our different faith traditions has compelled us to act on social issues affecting our community. We're going to be talking about how issues of injustice are understood in the context of our unique stories and our unique scriptures as people of faith. And it's my hope that by the end of the evening, you're going to have a better understanding of these issues through the lens of your faith and beliefs, but also that you'll have a better perspective on how other people's faith traditions, how other people's ways of believing lead them to justice as well. Now, I said I believe that this is a sacred discussion. I believe that because this conversation of what does it mean to have a theology of justice has been life-changing for me. And I believe when we understand a theology of justice, it can be community-changing for each and every one of us. At Faith in Texas, we believe this discussion is important because we believe it is the power of faithful people that is most able to create positive change in our community. In my tradition as a Christian, we say that when people are operating out of the deep rooting of their faith, that we can move mountains. Are we good on translation? So, I'm going to pause for just a moment, English speakers. We are not all English speakers here, so we'll be doing this in 2 languages. So what we're doing right now is just being sure our translation equipment is working properly so that our Spanish speakers can also hear and understand. Good? Good. Do I need to repeat? So I'm just going to, English speakers, I'm just going to repeat what I just said so that our Spanish speakers can also hear it. So bear with us for one moment. So we're gathered here tonight for a sacred discussion. Tonight we're going to talk about what it means to have a theology of justice. Theology is the study of God and belief. So a theology of justice is the study of a God of justice. Our goal tonight is to explore how our rooting in our different faith traditions has compelled us to act on social issues affecting our community. We'll be talking about how issues of injustice are understood in the context of our unique stories and scriptures. And I hope that by the end of the evening, you'll have a better understanding of the issues affecting your community through the lens and rooting of your faith, but also that you'll have a better understanding of how other people's faith tradition also leads them to the work of justice. Now, I said that I believe this is a sacred discussion, and that is because this has been a discussion that is life-changing for me. And I believe when we operate out of a theology of justice, it can be community-changing for us all. That's because at Faith in Texas, we believe this discussion, or we believe that the power of faithful people is the most able to create positive change in our community. In my tradition, we say that when we operate out of the deep rooting of our faith, we can move mountains. All right, we all heard it. Some of y'all heard that twice, so hopefully we good now, right? Thank y'all. All right, so in that spirit, please know that we're not just talking about justice tonight. We're asking you to seek your role as a faithful person in how we respond to injustice. So as we discuss how the work of justice is integral to each of our faiths, please ask yourself, what commitments can I make to help create justice? I'm going to say that again. What commitments can I make to help create justice in my community? We're going to be returning to that question at the end of the night, and I hope you will reflect on it with us throughout the night. Now, I'm excited to welcome up our panel of faith leaders, but before I do, just a couple notes. First of all, each of you received a pledge to action card when you walked in today. We're going to talk a lot more about those later in the evening, But please don't leave without filling that out, because that's our way to be able to follow up with you and let you know about other events coming up in the community and how you can be involved. Second, we're going to have opportunities for our clergy leaders to respond to your questions throughout the night. If you would like to submit a question, you got a blank index card when you came in. Just throughout the night, if you hear something like, I want to hear more about this, or what about this, write out your question on that. At the appropriate time, our moderator, Akila Wallace, will invite you to pass those to the edge of the aisle where they'll be collected, and then we're going to answer as many of those as we can. We may not be able to get to all of them, but you'll also find in your program tonight the contact information for all of our clergy speakers tonight if you want to follow up with them afterwards with your questions. Sound good? All right, well, please help me in welcoming our panel to the stage. First, I would like to welcome the pastor of City Temple Seventh-day Adventist Church, our gracious host tonight, Reverend Dr. Jaime Kowlessar. Dr. Kowlessar is the pastor of City Temple, as I said, and the chair of our Faith in Texas Clergy Steering Committee. He previously ministered in his native New York, and as pastor of City Temple, Dr. Kowlessar has relentlessly pursued community activism and involvement, challenging the church to heed the call of Christ to be relevant and present in the lives of those in need. He has led those efforts by joining with community and local church leaders to implement strategies that improve the economic, educational, and spiritual conditions of the Sierra Crest community. He's completed his undergraduate studies in theology at Atlantic Union College, as well as his Master's of Divinity at Andrews University and his Doctorate of Ministry degree from the United Theological Seminary. He's currently working on his next PhD, because he's crazy, in public policy and social change with an emphasis in Martin Luther King's beloved community with women's and gender studies. He lives by 4 words: resist, redeem, reclaim, and renew. Please welcome my friend, Dr. Jaime Kowlessar. Next, I would like to welcome Rabbi Elana Zelony. Rabbi Zelony is the rabbi of Congregation Beth Torah in Richardson. She's a member of the Richardson Interfaith Alliance and an alumni of Leadership Richardson, a program that builds leaders for the city. She's a member of Rabbis Without Borders, a network that emphasizes pluralism, innovation, and service in the rabbinate. She is the first female rabbi in the conservative Jewish movement to lead a synagogue in the state of Texas, having previously served in San Francisco and Atlanta. Rabbi Zelony received her ordination from the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies and also holds a master's degree from American Jewish University's Graduate Center for Jewish Education. Rabbi Zelony's rabbinate emphasizes pluralism, inclusion, interfaith work, spirituality, and involvement with her community. Please welcome Rabbi Zelony. Next, I want to welcome Reverend Manda Adams to the stage. Reverend Adams is the pastor of First Community United Church of Christ in East Dallas. Pastor Manda was ordained into the United Church of Christ in 2010 in Fort Worth, Texas, and over the next 6 years, she served churches in Ithaca, Rochester, and Buffalo before joining First Community in June 2016. Manda and her spouse, Syed Raymond, live an interfaith life and enjoy sharing about how their Christian and Muslim faiths intersect and help one another grow in their faith. So she has this conversation every night at the dinner table. So please welcome Reverend Manda. And finally, I'd like to welcome Imam Azhar Subedar. Imam Subedar is the Imam of the Islamic Association of Collin County, Plano, Masjid. He has been serving the needs of Muslim communities across the United States of America since 2002. Being a religious scholar with a master's in Islamic sciences and Arabic literature, his vision is to address the contemporary needs of the Muslim community by bringing relevancy to the holy text while confronting the social issues of today's world from a moral perspective. He has previously served as a religious advisor to the Florida Department of Education for over a decade, and was also a member of the White House Faith-Based Community Initiatives Program under President Bush. Having served as an imam of multiple masjids throughout his career, he has experienced firsthand the power of faith in dealing with issues that affect different communities. Please welcome Imam Subedar. And finally, I would like to welcome our esteemed Executive Director of Faith in Texas, Akila Wallace. Akila is going to be moderating our panel tonight. Akila brings to Faith in Texas more than 17 years of experience as a relationships manager with expertise in fund development, event planning and promotions, marketing, multicultural media sales, and project management. She can do it all. Her love for connecting community organizations with financial and in-kind resources has resulted in over $5 million in revenue support to date. She is a Dallas Business Journal 40 Under 40 honoree and a 2018 Public Voices Greenhouse Op-Ed Fellow. Her philanthropic leadership includes the founding of Texas's first African-American giving circle, Heritage Giving Fund at Texas Women's Foundation, awarding nearly $30,000 in grants to Black women-led organizations, in addition to providing consulting services for small to medium-sized community organizations. And welcome Akila to the stage, and she'll be taking it from here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and joining us and just being in fellowship with us on this evening. As we know, there are many other places you could be, other things you could be doing right now, but we really appreciate you coming and spending this evening with us to be a part of this really important and timely dialogue. And thank you to all of you, distinguished clergy, for joining us and for your contributions and leadership in support of Faith in Texas over the years. So, yes, thank you. So we're going to jump right into this, okay? All right. So during our listening campaigns in 2018, and that's Faith in Texas, we found that many of our members struggle to access fair and affordable housing because of their income, criminal history, race, immigration status, gender identity, or sexuality. According to the city, 6 out of 10 families in Dallas are housing burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on housing. And at Dallas City Temple, our research found that 40% of homeowners struggle to afford their property taxes. What do the scriptures and stories of your faith have to say to those who are struggling to access or maintain just housing? Reverend Manda, we'll start with you.
At First Community Church, which is located in Far East Dallas at Ferguson and Buckner, one of our members has lost housing and has also been denied housing because of her sexuality. Another has a landlord who takes such poor care of the units, and she's been without plumbing so many times that she is considering moving into a shelter. Another has had difficulty finding housing due to his criminal history. Many of my members also live in East Dallas, and they worry that rising property taxes will price them out of their homes, in large part because perfectly good older houses are being torn down and McMansions being built in their place. The legacy of racism and economic segregation in Dallas makes these issues even more prevalent in this area, in South Dallas, among Black and brown people. In Luke chapter 12, Jesus tells a parable about a man who has so much grain that he doesn't know what to do with it. So he decides to tear down his grain silos and build bigger ones, just so he can feel secure. We don't need bigger houses. We don't need to accumulate more things. We need homes for people who don't have safe, affordable housing. What if the man in the story had instead looked around at his neighbors to see how he might share his abundance with them? Isaiah 58 says, "Is this not the fast that I choose? To loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover them and not to hide yourself from your own kin." My faith tells me that where God is present is in the streets, in tent cities, in housing projects, and in hearts agonizing about how they will pay their bills. God dwells among the brokenhearted and the downtrodden. God makes a home among the homeless. When we ensure just housing for people, we are doing it for God, who dwells in every human being, and we can do it.
Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, so this is one of the statistics that came out was, what we studied and what we learned here at this church. And I want to thank Reverend Manda for just articulating that so well. Housing creates community, it creates safety, and it also creates sanctuary for individuals. And what we're seeing with this crisis is that a lot of my members or a lot of individuals in this community have to move further away from where they work. And it's becoming very hard for them to even have a well and prosperous life that all of us believe that we're all afforded to have. So I think our faith has to move us and press us towards making sure that these laws are just, and so that individuals can keep what they have, what they own, and so that they can stay there, they can pass it down to others.
Can I just see where Maria is? Okay, so I'll try to speak slowly enough that you can translate. Okay, so an important thing to understand about Jewish theology is that the law paves our relationship to God and with humanity. The laws that God gives are our theology. So the texts that I brought you tonight, they are commandments and therefore our theology. In Deuteronomy 24, it teaches about a man who is needy. It says, if he is a needy man, you shall not go to sleep in his pledge. You must return the pledge to him at sundown, that he may sleep in his cloth and bless you, and it will be to your merit before God. You shall not abuse a needy and destitute laborer, whether a fellow countryman or stranger in one of the communities of your land. So what this text is saying is someone is so impoverished that the last thing he has left is his cloak. And he gives that cloak as a pledge that he will return alone. But when night falls, even if he is not yet able to pay back the loan, the lender has to give him back his cloak at night so that he won't freeze to death in his sleep. And what I take this to mean is everyone deserves a decent, safe place to lay their head at night. Even if they have not yet been able to get themselves out from under debt or into a secure financial situation, we do not keep the cloaks of people so that they freeze to death at night. And I think, too, when the Torah commands us, when God says, don't abuse a needy and destitute laborer, we need to create a society where people who are working, and not working for that matter, but this is a different category. We first see folks that cannot work losing their housing, and now we're seeing folks who are working very hard losing their housing. And our theology teaches that is not okay.
Imam?
The statistics are there. The texts are there. The life that we read about remains in the books, and the lives that we live on the ground is the reality. There is an ultimate goal that we're all aspiring for. Taxes that are low, housing that is affordable, quality of life. But that's our long-term goal. What is our short-term goal? Just a night ago I was watching about a student who had to move in with his parents because he couldn't afford to live on his own and pay his student loans. That's the reality in America right now. But as people of faith, our duty is to inspire people to see the good in all circumstances. And I want to do just that in the next 2 minutes. In America, I've noticed people cling on to hope. There's a hope that one day the house will become gold. There's a hope one day that our dreams will be fulfilled. There's a hope that one day our dream home will truly be our home. And that's the difference between America and most of the people in the Eastern countries. In the East, they don't hope, they've accepted. They've accepted the reality to be what it is. They've accepted in Bangladesh that $5 is the wage a month for a person that works. And I'll tell you the difference between the hope and the acceptance. If we accept the situation, we'll be able to see the good in it as we move towards the ultimate goal. We are working towards housing that's affordable. Let's take opportunity of this time to make our homes more loving. And that's by the way we are improvising, coming together, children moving back in with their parents or grandparents, to see that love actually nurture, that we can see homes once more. I'll end with this story of Moses, peace be upon him. One day, one of his fellow community members came to him and said, all I get every day is a piece of bread from God. That's my daily sustenance for the longest time. Can you ask God to increase it for me? So Moses asked God, he's talking about one piece of bread for like 30 years. You'll like maybe 2. And God said, no, that's what he gets. And so when he related that information to him, he said, I accept that this will be my lot, my share. A few months after, Moses was passing by him, and lo and behold, this guy had livestock, he had fruits and vegetables, and Moses was like, wait, you're the guy who only got 1 bread. And so what I started doing was I saved 1 bread every second day. I ate 1 bread for 2 days. I invested that bread, and today you see what is in front of me. So as we work towards the goal, the ultimate goal, let us make use of the immediate goal.
Amen. Thank you. I like that. We're going to make use of what we have. Y'all like that? We're still going to aspire. I appreciate that. We're still going to aspire for something greater. But while we're in where we're in right now, we're going to take the time to just, in my tradition, just glorify and say thank you. So we're going to make a little bit of a transition. Thank you. In other work that we've done, so in our communities and congregations, we have seen story after story where people are arrested for nonviolent misdemeanor crimes and are put into jail, not because they pose a threat to our community, but because they cannot afford arbitrary cash bail set by magistrates in Dallas County. Faith in Texas has led a campaign to end the use of cash bail in debtors' prison, more specifically our Live Free campaign team. What does your sacred text or faith principles say to those kept in jail just because they are poor or unable to afford their bail? And Jaime, if you could start.
Sure. So we're talking about a system that targets a specific group of people, and that money is being used to continue to perpetuate this system, to warehouse black and brown bodies specifically. And when you look at the Old Testament, and I'll start there and go into the New Testament, you see that there was a system, and God used Moses to overturn a system that was oppressing poor people, that was oppressing the children of Israel. Moses did not go to Pharaoh and say, can we have weekends off? Or can we have the Sabbath off? He said, no, God told me to overturn your system, of oppression, of making bricks without straw. And then we see further on in Deuteronomy 5:15 where God tells, he reminds them of the commandment. He says, remember the Sabbath because you were once slaves in Egypt. In other words, if you are going to rest on my Sabbath day, then you ought to be freeing other people from the same bondage that I brought you from out as well. And so we can't ignore these instances inside of the scriptures that pushes us and reminds us that if we are in Sabbath rest, if we are in communion with God, then it mandates us to free those that are being enslaved by a system. We go further into the New Testament. Jesus' first campaign speech when he walks into the temple, he quotes from Isaiah. He says, I have come to set the captives free. Sometimes we spiritualize that and make it seem like he's just spiritually setting them free. But slowing down. There, I got the sign right there. All right? Are you ready for me to go? Okay. So those sacred texts in my faith pushes me to overturn a system that is oppressing poor people. It is unconscionable to make poor people pay for their freedom, to set high bail prices for them in order to get out, and then that destroys the whole family structure. Now, the other thing, too, is this, is that even though what the prison system is legal, it does not make it just. Paul and Silas were in prison that was legal, but it was not just. And so as Proverbs 21:3 reminds us, to do what is right and what is just. And I think that's what God calls all of our faith traditions to do, to follow his law and his word, and that we ought to make sure that we are reminding and pressing and overturning systems that are not just, because that's what we want to see in this society, in this earth that God has given to us, that we are living in the just way.
Rabbi?
All right, Leviticus 19. It's addressing judges. You shall not render an unfair decision. Do not favor the poor or show deference to the rich. Judge your kinsman fairly. When I read that this morning, I said, really, God? We're not supposed to favor the poor? What are you thinking? They are the ones in need of our help. But then I thought about it, and I think the text is saying something much more important. We will not create laws that would cause us to need to favor the poor. We will create laws from the beginning that apply equally to the rich and the poor. That's right. And the next line of text in Deuteronomy says, do not deal basely with your countrymen. Do not profit by the blood of your fellow. I am God. So when we create a system where we profit off of the blood of the most vulnerable, that's a big no-no according to the Bible. That is theology for Judaism.
Thank you. Y'all ready? Y'all know after this, like, that's when we're going to say, okay, now what are we going to do about this? Because we can't let this keep happening. Because our texts, various texts are telling us otherwise. Yes, Reverend.
I like to tell stories, so Shannon Davies was arrested for a misdemeanor. She could not pay her $500 bail, and because she is transgender, she was placed in solitary confinement for 5 days. According to the Dallas Morning News, it was a carved-out cinder block room where water was limited to 2 flushes a day, plus a 6-ounce cup to drink every few hours. Many other Black and brown, transgender, gay, lesbian people have reported abuse and mistreatment in the Dallas County Jail. People who experience oppression in all its forms and especially those who experience more than one type of oppression, are more likely to be poor. Cash bail preys on the poor and makes people like Shannon Davies more vulnerable. If Shannon had not been in jail simply because she could not pay bail, she would not have been subject to the torture of solitary confinement. The system, as has been talked about, favors the rich. Those who can afford bail are often able to go back to their lives and get an attorney while awaiting and preparing for trial. Those who cannot, regardless of guilt or innocence, and regardless of the severity of the crime with which they have been accused, have their lives uprooted and sit in jail at taxpayers' expense. And then they can lose their jobs, miss out on income, have trouble paying their rent, and maybe lose custody of their children. My scriptures and my faith warn that God will set the world aright. Jesus was so angry with inequality in a system where religion and politics had become intertwined, like much of what we see today, that he turned over tables and drove out money changers with a whip. And in the prayer that Jesus taught, that many Christians say every Sunday, we pray words that many of us like to use different words, like trespasses or sins. We shy away from the words that hit the closest to home. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Hebrews 13 calls on Christians to keep in mind those who are in prison, as though you were in prison with them, and be mindful of those who are being treated badly, since you know what they are enduring. My scriptures, my faith tell me that when you suffer, I suffer. When you rejoice, I rejoice. When one member of the human family is mistreated or held in jail without bond, all of us are imprisoned. All of us are mistreated. And when another is set free, I am set free. When you are treated with the dignity that you deserve just because you exist, I am dignified as well. As Wes mentioned earlier, Christians say that faith can move mountains. And I believe that means even the mountain of a huge and unjust system. Whatever you ask for in prayer, Jesus said, believe that you have already received it and it will be done for you. And so we must pray not only with our words, but with our actions, and to put our faith into practice, to end unjust systems, to end cash bail, and to set people free so that all may be free.
You know, it's in times like these, people ask the question, where's God? You all come to church and mosque and synagogue and pray, where's God? I'm sure God is telling us right now, where are you? Where are you? Because our scriptures tell us that God is with us, so where are we? Now understand that in Islam, from the lens of our scripture, every prophet, every messenger that came to introduce or restore or uphold justice. Our society today isn't an unjust society. It's the result of the lack of justice. When we're not upholding what's right, then we have actively given way for what's wrong. You know, they say justice is blind. I say justice is when you blind your eyes and you see from your heart. And injustice is when you veil your heart and you see with your eyes, which means these are my people. I'll give them a slap on the wrist. These are the people I despise. I will allow them to face my torture and my wrath. But guess what? There's a God up there. And that God is saying, change and repent. If not, when you come to me, there will be no repentance. There will be no change. And at that time, you will account for your actions. But we don't want people to suffer tomorrow, because people who are true to their faith want suffering for all to be alleviated today in this world.
That's right.
The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon, said, help your brother, ظَالِمًا أَوْ مَظْلُومًا, regardless if they're the transgressor or that they're transgressed. So the companion said, okay, we understand the ones who's being transgressed upon or oppressed. How do you help a transgressor? And he said, let them know that what they're doing is wrong. I'll finish with 20 seconds and say this. Do not become emotional and fight the system. Become sane and stable and create an alternative system. And let the alternative system thrive, that the current system falls to its knees because of it.
And thank you so much. And something I just want to bring, I don't know, a lot of the text that you have referenced, the word poor comes up a lot. And oftentimes there are people who may disassociate themselves because they say, well, that's not my economic status or the class of which I identify. However, many of us know, I will speak for myself in that, and family members and members of my community and those that I'm close with, friends, young professionals, working class people who could very well connect to the stories that are being told right now. Know that driving out on today, and if you went over a little further over into South Dallas where they have all kinds of sheriffs, marshals, and everybody on every corner, the likelihood of you potentially being pulled over and you not being aware of a past ticket that you didn't pay, and there's a warrant for your arrest, and you're arrested on this evening. You think about the likelihood of your ability to potentially make your bail as well. So this isn't necessarily just a class issue. This spreads beyond many levels of many of us who are working in different levels. So I just want to make sure I clarify that. Oftentimes that, some people say, oh, well, that's not me. And they listen to the story and they think that's somebody else, versus really taking it in and saying, you know what, I probably, if I am true with myself, I'm check to check just like the other, my neighbor. And so, again, self-reflection in these moments. So thank you to all of you. And I want to make sure I'm mindful of keeping up with the time. And so we have one more question I'd like for the distinguished panel to answer and speak to before we open it up for Q&A from all of you. So as we prepare to transition to this final question, if you could send over your questions that you may have on your cards that were given to you, there'll be someone who can collect them from you. Okay, so just send them to the center aisle, and there'll be someone to collect them from you. Good. Okay. Oh, this is heavy. So as we speak, there are children and adults locked in appalling conditions in camps on American soil. But this crisis is not just at the border. Just last week, Faith in Texas helped free one of our members from an immigration detention center. What does your faith have to say to immigrants in this moment as they face unprecedented oppression in our community? What does this have to say to those of us witnessing it, unsure of what to do? Imam?
You know, when we were kids and we read the stories from the scriptures of how slavery and the treatment of humanity occurred back in the days, and you say, man, these people are crazy. What was in their head that they were doing such things? And today we're actually witnessing history in the remaking. I want to say two things to this. Number one, we all are travelers on this earth, and the earth belongs to the Lord Almighty. And so we all are in one way or another an immigrant from one land to another. And I want you all to please promise me that you're going to continue to remind every person that you see that we all are immigrants here. Let us not let a generation pass in silence where they say, no, this was ours. Nothing is ours. Everything belongs to the Lord. That being said, Islam's history is based on immigration. And not only immigration, but it shows that when immigration is met with the cooperation of human beings, everyone thrives and everyone succeeds. Islam had 2 migrations, the first of which was to, at that time, Abyssinia, Ethiopia, and they were welcomed by the Christians with open arms, and King Negus said he will protect them with his life, and he did. And the second immigration, or the mass migration, occurred to Yathrib or Medina, where 3 predominant Jewish tribes took care of the Arabs that came from the south. My fellow brothers and sisters, we have a calling before us today, and that is a calling to help our brothers and sisters who are on the borders, our sons and our daughters, our grandsons and our granddaughters. Doesn't matter what the color of their skin is, doesn't matter where they're from, we need to help them. And it's going to be 4 stages of helping. I'll end with that. Number 1 is you should be crying every night for them and praying to your Lord. Because if you can't shed a tear, you don't care. You have to cry for them. Not saying, well, if that was me. No, that is me already. This is a result of my failure. Number 2, you have to do whatever's in your capacity through the legal means to let your voice be heard that this is something that I will not tolerate as a citizen or as a human being. Number 3, upon their release, we have to make sure that they have community, economic safety and security. They have stability so that they can grow. We need to make sure that they have places to go, jobs to do, people to be around, so that they can live a human life. Let us not see the scripture repeating itself on us. Let us learn from what has been done and hope that we can do better this time around.
Reverend?
My ancestors came to this country, to this land, before the United States was in anyone's sights in the 1600s. As a Christian, as a white woman, I have to reckon with the fact that my people's history is one of oppression and colonialization and of using the stories of Christian faith and the scriptures of Christian faith to oppress, to murder, to enslave and traffic people. My faith is also a story of liberation. It is also a story of people who have found hope in the scriptures and who have found cause to do what is just and what is right. I am inspired by the small Christian community in Le Chambon in the last century, a small Protestant Christian community who welcomed and protected Jews, who were then called illegal, who were at risk. And many people have drawn parallels between what happened leading up to the Holocaust and what is happening now. It is incumbent upon us who are people of faith to look to those in our history who did the right thing, not to follow the example of those who used their scripture and their faith abusively, but those who used it to liberate. About 5,000 Jews passed through Le Chambon and the surrounding villages. In August of 1942, French authorities moved in with buses, intent on purging the town of its, quote, illegal residents. Pastor Daniel Trocme was arrested for his refusal to provide names of Jewish children. He was held for 5 weeks and pressured to agree to obey all government orders. After his release, he was forced to go underground. Even in his absence, the village continued to welcome persecuted Jews into their homes. His wife, Magda, said, "There would be a knock at the door. I would open the door. There would be someone cold, tired, hungry, and very frightened. I said, 'Come in.' It was the right thing to do." Peter Feigl, who was one of those Jewish people who benefited from protection there, said, "My entire story couldn't be related today if it had not been for people who decided to become involved and to do the right thing." Sometimes our faith and our government are at odds, and we must obey the law of God, which is love, before anything else. And so, to those who need shelter, those who need to know they are loved, those who are feeling afraid, I say, come in. We say, come in. To those of you wondering what you can do, open your doors, open your hearts, open your wallets, that all who are in need may come in.
Thank you. Rabbi.
The first Jew was Abraham, who left his home in Haran and immigrated to Canaan. That's what the Torah teaches, but we have another collection of sacred texts called the Midrash. And the Midrash gives, among other things, the origin story, the background. It fills in the details. Why did Abraham go? Because he had become a monotheist and he was no longer safe living in Haran. He was being persecuted by the king. And so he went to find safer ground. And from the beginning, this is the story of the Jews. And throughout world history, this is the story of the Jews. We have never lived in a country more than 500 years before we've had to flee anti-Semitism and move on. So that is at the core of who we are. And so our theology has always taught us to welcome the stranger, for we were strangers in Egypt, and we know what that was like.
All excellent answers. As I was sitting there processing, and I'm thinking about one of the things that we're battling is rhetoric and how language is used in America. And I think the most important thing that we can do is educate ourselves. Like, there are two borders. There's not just a southern border, there's a northern border as well. And it's not only Central Americans who are coming to America. Other thing, Jesus was an immigrant that crossed over lines for what? Safety and refuge. And if we're thinking about, we heard last week or a week ago, we're talking about rhetoric and how it's used. When the President of the United States said, you can go back to your country. It's amazing how that language is always used on black and brown people, but never on white people.
Well, now, yes.
You never tell a white person who complains about America, go back to your country. And as was so eloquently stated here, we're all immigrants. And I think as far as it goes to education, if I take a story from my faith tradition, it is a story that's popularly known about the Good Samaritan. And here this individual asks Jesus this question, what makes a person good? And then Jesus tells the story, and then he says, go and do the same. Who is your neighbor? And when you unpack that story, you understand that Jesus is telling that man, your neighbor is the person you've been taught to hate. And I think when we understand how we have been socially conditioned by the media, that we've been taught to hate certain individuals, that if I see someone with a, what's the proper term for the head wrap? Hijab. Thank you. I want to make sure I'm correct. With that on their head, that they are a terrorist. All Jews are thieves and, stingy people. All white people are evil, or, all black people are thugs and animals who want to rob and rape your women. We've been taught to hate groups, which informs our public policy, which informs our media, which informs our citizens. And when we begin to start stretching across the aisles and actually having more forums like this, then we'll understand that our differences are what make us unique and what bring us together. And so, as everything was stated so well, I think it's important that we, like a computer, change our operating system and update it to what is really true and what is right.
Yes. Love it. Thank you so much. Yes, outdated. It's time for some upgrades. Yes. Whole new system. Start over. So thank you for those of you who have provided some questions for the panel. So let me read off some of these. And feel free to jump in and answer. Timekeeper, keep us on track. Thank you. Let's see, we have, how do you not become discouraged when it seems there is no, and I'll say little to no justice sometimes on earth, below the heavens?
I mean, for me, I do get discouraged, and I know that one of the one of the main things, and this was shared to me, I believe, by Brittany, was that white supremacy is created to make you tired. That you just want to give up and just walk away. But for me, what keeps me motivated and going is what I believe scripturally, and also being that wedge in the door that I'm not just fighting for myself, but I'm fighting for my children.
Yes.
Who have to live on this earth. And so that I'm trying to make it better for them. And so that's what keeps me motivated and keeps me going. And surrounded myself with wonderful people like yourselves.
Thank you. Others? How do we not become discouraged?
The celebration of Shabbat, of the Sabbath, is an important way to renew my hope and my faith. To take a day of rest where I turn off my electronics and don't take in everything that's happening, and have some time to breathe and reflect on what actions I want to take. And the Sabbath is also a time that I have committed to gathering with my community and friends and family and God, and that renews my strength because I am not alone and we are surrounded by people that are looking for solutions.
2 things. Stop listening to stories. Start telling your story. Number 2, I'm not doing it for myself. I'm not doing it for my kids. I'm not doing it for you. I'm not doing it for anyone else. I believe if I want heaven tomorrow, I need to prove to God that I can make heaven here on earth. So we're here to make heaven, and we're going to make it together. Doesn't matter if the oceans rise or the land falls. We're going to work together. So just turn off those senses and turn on yourself, and the story will be a completely different one.
Try to be quick with mine. So I had a mentor in seminary who said she had this revelation one day. It just struck her that we clergy get paid to love people. And that is the coolest thing in the world, really. And to me, that even if I didn't get paid to do it, I would be doing it, because it is a privilege to get to love people. And self-care is necessary. Compassion fatigue is real. So taking the time to care for your spirit, for your body, to just do things that make you smile. For me, just watching my dogs be dogs brings me a lot of joy. Spending time with children, with my spouse, with friends. And Faith in Texas does so much to keep me from being discouraged, because it gives me places to put my faith into action.
Right. Y'all hear that last part? Okay, sorry. Okay. Yes. Be not discouraged. Come to Faith in Texas. So how do we address religious leaders that preach prosperity gospel in the ideology that poverty comes from lack of faith? It's heavy, it's loaded. It's necessary. We need a word right now.
Everybody looking at me, all right. Well, you always have with the empire, and you have preachers of the empire that perpetuate a counter narrative of what the gospel actually is. And it's unfortunate that it turns people off from Christianity because they think that the church is one big Ponzi scheme that is there to fill the pockets of the individual who stands on the stage. What do I think about that? I would say I don't think about that, because I don't have time to put energy into processing what they're doing. It's unfortunate. I don't like it, but I just continue to bathe myself in what the scriptures actually say. And even the God that we serve, the Jesus that we serve in the Christian faith, who said foxes have holes and birds have their nests, but the Son of Man had nowhere to lay his head. You know, he came riding in on a donkey, not on a stallion, things like that. So I understand that even though what I'm trying to say is that I don't think there's anything wrong with being rich, just as much as there's anything wrong with being poor. Well, yeah, there is something wrong in this society if we're making poor people poor. But I think for me, with that type of preaching and that gospel, it's unfortunate because it counters what God is actually trying to do through his people and on his earth.
I know sometimes we see something that maybe from a different faith or maybe our own faith, and it's something that we want to show to others how deplorable it is. For example, look what ISIS just said, kill America. Let me spread this YouTube video to 100 of my friends, and they could spread it to 100 more each. There's two problems here. Number one, you're actually helping them. And number two, you're empowering them. I'm not going to go into politics today. I'm not going to say a single name of anyone today, but I'll tell you one thing. Ignore. If you want to weaken the voices of wrong and hatred and divisiveness, turn it off. Don't talk about their story. Once they find out that they're speaking in their own echo chamber, it will be the last straw that breaks that camel's back. But the more we give emphasis to it, knowing that there's no God that would send punishment on his creation through a creation. God didn't send us here to kill each other. God didn't send us here for some to rule over others and show superiority over others. We need to know that in our hearts. And we need to hope that that message continues and not the other message.
Thank you. Right. What role does civil disobedience play in resistance to unjust policies?
Look, Abraham argued with God about the city of Sodom, so surely we can argue with our government too.
Right. Argue with Mike on this. Okay.
And I would say, too, we have only to look at successful movements in this country and around the world, and they often require civil disobedience. And civil disobedience is not disobedience to God when it is in service of God's law of love. Then it is obedience, just not to the powers that like to think they're in control.
3 Hebrew boys.
All right.
So we're not bowing down to your image. What? We'll take the fiery furnace. You know, so I believe it does have a role and plays a part in the social justice movement.
Let's see. What action should organizations and we take or join to be the most effective in accomplishing justice? Oh, I can answer that. Faith in Texas. All right. What's next? Okay, no. What are the actions should an organization should we take or join to be most effective in accomplishing justice?
I think it's sort of like when you're trying to exercise more and you don't like exercise, they say find something that you do like. You know, the problems in the world, there are so many of them. Just find an organization or a task that suits you and commit yourself to it. You don't have to do everything. Pick what speaks to you and stick to it.
Organizations are many out there. And all these organizations are trying to do good and trying to make a difference and trying to change the status quo. I would recommend that where you live, your neighborhood, meaning your block or actually your street, what are the things that I need to address there? And what organization can I be a part of that helps me fix that problem or predicament is, I think, the focus that we all should have. You know, focus locally as we think globally, and hopefully we'll have a dual impact.
Yeah. I aligned with Faith in Texas because of the core values that I personally had lined up with what this organization had as well. And so I didn't have to relearn something. It was already written and it was already there. So that's what made me join forces with Faith in Texas with the various campaigns. So I would suggest, what are some of your passions? What are some of the things? What are some of your passions? What are some of the things? I'm from New York. I can't help it. I have to talk fast. Some of the passions and the things that you care about, and line that up with whatever organization that you want to work with.
If you are a person of faith and you are not involved in a faith community that is working in your local community, then you need to find one. Or go to the leaders of your congregation and say, here's what I'm noticing in our community. How can we get involved? Because some congregations are not that active yet. Some clergy are waiting for members who will give them the freedom to keep pushing and moving along. Sometimes congregations shackle us clergy. We may want to move things and to get more involved in the community, and we settle for doing it ourselves. But what we would love to see is the congregation do it. So if you are a member of a congregation, then go tell your clergy person you will support them, and go to the lay leadership and tell them and urge them to get involved. If you are not a person of faith, then you might look for a different kind of organization. Faith in Texas is a faith-based organization. We draw our convictions from our faiths, but we have many people who are involved who are not people of faith and simply share a faith in humanity. So there are plenty of ways for you to get engaged. You will hear a little more about how you can get involved with Faith in Texas in just a moment or two. So if that doesn't speak to you, though, talk to your clergy person too. It's very likely that they know places you can get involved as well.
Well, thank you so much to all of you for your wonderful words, your inspiration, your encouragement, the challenges that you have made to each of us in ensuring that we are knowledgeable about not only the text of which our faiths call us to study and learn and live from, but also to really be thinking about how it is directly connected to humanity and our lives as we continue to exist as sisters and brothers in community here on earth. So thank you so much for your time, your commitment. So appreciate you. And so I believe it is time for the transition. Look, let me pull up my paper. And thank you we didn't get to answer all of the questions that were handed to me, so I do apologize. We just want to be mindful of the time that we have on this weekday evening and getting everyone back to their families. So I see different people. Let me make sure who is up next? Look, nobody. So we're going to welcome Reverend Jaime Kowlessar back.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you to our vivacious and talented and gifted host, all right?
thank you for coming out this evening. We're not totally done, but we do want to take an opportunity to ask you to, I guess, to help Faith in Texas do what they do in a tangible way. As we know that this work is, a lot of us volunteer to do it, but also counts on a lot of money and resources in order for us to go and to fight for justice. And so we're going to have some individuals that will come around, and they're going to have some envelopes. And what we're going to do is hand those envelopes out, and we're hoping that you would put something in there so that we can continue to fight and to do the work of justice. Can we do that? Is that okay? Oh, what? Can we do that? Is that okay? All right. And so I believe those envelopes are coming around right now, or you already have them. And so if you can just please put something in there, it would be Faith in Texas would greatly, greatly appreciate it. Did I do your job?
Okay, so, wow, that's hot. Okay. While you all are doing that, thank you, first of all. My name is Reverend Robin Murray, and I'm one of the organizers at Faith in Texas. And I truly feel privileged to be in this space, to share this space with each of you, because something brought you into this room. Your faith, your moral values, your heart said, I need to be in this space to understand this topic a little bit more deeply. And there is a pledge card, there's an action that we can take from this space. So you probably received a pledge card when you got in. If you did not, raise your hand and one of our amazing fellows will get you a card. But this action is more than just, let me just see what I can do for the time being. I will share something with you. I just got back from Chicago, and there was a convening with labor unions and organizers. And they were trying to figure out, like, how can we merge our efforts and utilize, contract bargaining to get things that people need, like housing, better housing, when we go to the table. And there was a woman by the name of Stacy Davis Gates. She's the VP of the Chicago Teachers Union. And she said, you know what, guys? I've been in a lot of spaces with people who are trying to fight for justice, and we are so patient. We are patiently waiting for policies to change, patiently waiting for laws to change. We just some patient people. She said, but you know what? There are people who are not patient. They are not waiting in line. They are not waiting their turn to speak up. They are not waiting their turn to mobilize their people. They are not waiting their turn to take action. And they certainly aren't waiting their turn to cash their paychecks. And so she said, leave here with impatience. And so I'm standing before you today with a level of impatience. All the things that we heard tonight should drive us to our core to be impatient about the things that are happening in our local community. And so one of the ways that we can take care of and be a part of the action is to join Faith in Texas in the Dream Free Vote. So we're asking you to fill out this card to pledge that you will vote, because your vote is what allows laws and policies to change. Your vote is what puts people into office that we can hold accountable. And who knows that we have a big vote coming up in 2020? Do we know that there's a big vote, a big election, coming up? So please fill this out. And additionally, if you are interested in ongoing action with Faith in Texas, you'll notice there is an option at the bottom to check off on one of the 3 campaigns that are listed. That's going to be immigration, that's going to be bail, ending cash bail, and then housing. So we're asking you to fill this out, but also honing in Stacy Davis Gates to leave here impatient. If you do not feel that you are called to be a part of this particular movement, we want you to be a part of a movement. Find where you need to be so that you can act. We want you to be with us at Faith in Texas, but find something. Leave impatient so that we can make change. All right? So, these cards, are we going to collect them now? Okay, let's pass them to the aisles. All right, awesome. Take your time. We didn't do a sign-in, so go ahead, take your time, fill it out. If you have questions, we have organizers here to answer any questions you might have. All right, so Wes is going to take it over. This is our Faith and Formation organizer. He has helped to coordinate all of this. Can we give him a hand? All right.
Well, really, I'm going to transfer that right over to our clergy. They organized this, planned for this, thought about how to do it, because speaking about this theology is so important to them. Can you give our clergy a big round of applause? So I want to return to that question I asked you to reflect on at the beginning of the night. What is the commitment that you can make? We've given you a couple options of how you can be involved starting tonight, but what is the bigger commitment you can make? Maybe it's to talk about this with your friends. Maybe it's to join one of our teams. Maybe you checked one of those boxes. But I want to invite you to turn to one of your neighbors, turn and just look at your neighbor. This is the interactive portion of the evening. Look your neighbor in the eyes, the windows of their souls. And I want you to speak that commitment to one another. What are you going to do walking out of here tonight? Take a second. Speak that commitment to your neighbor. What are you going to do? I should have said at the beginning in like 2 sentences or less. You good? What's your commitment, Petey? Yes, ma'am.
Gordon was telling me that you're going to have VDR training in August.
I don't know nothing about that.
Well, maybe you should ask him up to because I wanted to know.
I don't know if we have details for it yet, but I can send it in an email and follow up.
When you close out, you might just want to tell them that the snacks and
I will do that. Okay. All right, can I hear like 2 people's commitments? You can just shout them out. What are you going to do walking out of here? 2 people. Be brave.
I'm going to stand in solidarity with what my brother was telling me, this lunch.
Yeah, Unite Here. So, shout out to our Unite Here friends who are fighting for better wages and working conditions that reflect their human dignity. If you hit the snack tables on the way out, there's snack tables on the way out. There's cars where you can find out how you can stand in solidarity with them. Thanks, Ro. One more person. What are you going to do to commit to do tonight? Yes, sir.
Grow our justice team in our own congregation.
I love that. You're going to grow our justice team. Where's my justice teams at? Did y'all hear that? In Espanol.
So I'm going to commit with my heart to help in all she can in going to different events and when we are doing deportation defense, even though I don't speak English, just a little. But I'm a citizen and I have a heart. Thank you.
So I want to send you out with something from my tradition, which is a benediction. May the divine creator, who I call God, may he take the commitments you have made tonight and forge them into justice for our community, for our neighbors, especially for those most impacted. Go in peace, enjoy some snacks, and have a lovely night. Thank you.